At Venue in a couple months, I think we're gonna form what's called a Venue Legacy Team. Scott and Josh and I are gonna form this Venue Legacy Team, and this is where we marry business to the vision of God. And if you're in business, and this is like, you can't even get into this club unless you give a tithe, and you're already giving offerings on top of that, because this is for people who think, I want to do something eternal with this, and I wonder how many people we can get to heaven using this resource that's going to fade away if we don't use it for something that matters. It's going to be this thing where, like, it doesn't decide the vision of the church, but it can pour gas on the fire. It will be the difference between heaven and hell for many people, because we can actually move further, faster, and quicker in the vision so that we can house more children and get more kids adopted and more of their family, and the ripple effect starting to spread out. If you're interested in that, go to the brick wall, by the way. And we'll tell you what, it's not going to be easy to get into, but nothing is easy that's worth building. Why? Because we are one generation away from crazy, or we are one generation away from revival. The leverage for you to get your finances right might be that day that you leave this earth. I don't think that personal happiness is a good leverage to get your finances right. I think personal happiness is a byproduct of following the Lord. I don't think it's a good leverage, like, I want to be happy, so I want to get my finances right. Why don't you pick up a vision that really matters? Something that will outlive you and outlast you. I saw a grandfather in the middle of a room one time in a family reunion that I was invited to. He's the nicest guy in town. Nicest guy in town, sitting in the middle of the room, well loved by everybody. But I saw people walking past him, and I remember something inside of me just revolting against. They walked past him, and they would, like, the grandkids would hug him. He was well loved, but nobody wanted to hear what he had to say. I didn't see anybody around him like, hey, help me with this problem. Hey, you lived a life. Tell me how you did it. We're struggling in our marriage. How did you get through it? We don't know what to do about our kids. Tell me what you did. Do you want to leave a zero residual effect behind you? Oh, he was nice. Who cares? I think you can be nice and do something great for God. But I think you should do something great for God. My kids' grandparents, can I brag on them a little bit? Pastors Richard and Beth. In their retirement, they have probably more time to raise our kids than we do. But the heritage that has come down to our children through them, that every Friday night they still go over and sleep over at their house. It's the highlight of my kids' week. I have a 21-year-old and a 19-year-old kid. They love it. They never make fun of grandma and grandpa. And there's a lot to make fun of. It's like, my iPad doesn't work. I'm still using my iPad to take pictures, which is weird. I'm just joking. They love it. They love hearing stories about all the mission trips in the third world poor that they fed. They love hearing the stories about what God did. And they love the heritage and the grit and the determination and the question. Now, my parents could have done a lot of different things in business, could have made a lot more money, could have spent it in a lot of different places. But at this stage in their life, they're at this place where you realize, like, they did exactly what they needed to do. And it's going to matter more than they could have ever done doing anything differently or anything else, because they remembered the Lord, they remembered Egypt, and they're teaching their grandchildren about it. And this is emotional. You think about your parents passing on in life. Whenever my wife thinks about my dad, actually dying one day, she starts crying, and I'm like, to me, I'll be glad when he's gone. No, I'm just You got to understand, a Christ follower treats it differently. Because I'm like, I'll see him soon enough. I'll see him soon enough. I had so many years with my parents. All of their principles live on inside of me, inside of my children. May they go on into the next generation and the next generation. Everything that their words are still fresh. Their words matter. They are what we have built our life upon. and following the Lord and coming out of their family lines, neither of which followed the Lord. And they came out and decided it was going to be different. And the glorious heritage of that. In the future, when your son asks, what is the meaning of the stipulations, decrees, and laws the Lord our God has commanded you? Tell him, oh, they just make a lot of sense. Tell him we were slaves of Pharaoh in Egypt, but the Lord brought us out of Egypt with a mighty hand. It doesn't say to say anything else. We were slaves of Egypt, but the Lord brought us out with a mighty hand. When our kids were smaller, when Pastor Aaron and I would bring our tithe, our 10th to the Lord, this is back in the day when you used to write checks. And sometimes we would write a check and leave it on the counter for the kids to see. And they'd be like, oh, Dad, that's a lot of money. It's nothing. We were slaves of Pharaoh in Egypt. I remember when we had nothing. When the devil had us by the throat. I haven't forgotten the lash of sin and the pain that the enemy has caused. We were slaves in Egypt, but the Lord brought us out with a mighty hand. We will not forget what the Lord has done. We will never forget Egypt. Whatever pain that you are in right now could actually be the gas on the fire of a worthy question that you could spend the rest of your life and live and die for. But I remember when I was a slave in Egypt. You know why churches die? Because they're trying not to. I think one of the reasons that the Lord has blessed Venue is that I feel like before we came, we bought our tombstone. We bought like the Venue Church tombstone, and we inscribed on the stone so that it would never change. Something that matters to us more than anything else matters. Everybody who came with us bought that tombstone. We were under so much duress at the time that I remember saying out loud, now I don't mean talk to the devil a lot, but I said this out loud. I'm like, devil, if you can't kill me before we go, you'd better get me before we go, because when we get there, you're not going to stop Jesus. And he tried. We carved this into that tombstone. In those early days, you hear it every week. A life saved is worth everything. How could we sacrifice what we had to sacrifice, which is nothing compared to Christians around the world? How could we sacrifice all of that pain? And we say it like this: a life saved is worth everything. Every cent we'll ever make, every drop of blood in our bodies, one more is worth everything. You're like, you don't mean that. We mean it. What keeps your eyes on the prize in the middle of the pain is what you see on that tombstone. It's not just a worthy church tombstone. I think it's a worthy life tombstone. A life saved is worth everything. Do we have a budget for my tombstone? I want that on my tombstone. A life saved is worth everything. Maybe a life saved was worth everything too. I found something worth dying for.
your life. You're who I saw back then. You're who God has given me the grace to help reach. You. Lord, give us vision to see what you see. Give us power to set captives free. Let your church awake this hour. Let your church awake.